if you told me that I was going to be talking about Panera Bread on this channel, so I was directed to an article by Patheos blogger Hemant Mehta, who runs a blog called Friendly Atheist. And the title of the article was Pagan Employee Sues Panera Bread, Citing Religious Discrimination by Her Managers. Now, he states that his assumption when he saw this was that someone needed religious holidays off and the manager wouldn't give them to her, but then he read the allegations of the filing and realized it's a lot worse. Now, I want to preface this a little bit because pagans usually aren't asking for holidays off, and this is actually a bad assumption. From what I've seen, a lot of us actually work too much and operate under the assumption that whatever company we're working for just doesn't care about our holidays. I've held several rituals, and sometimes people just can't come because of work, regardless of how important the holiday is. And unless it lines up with a holiday that Christians consider important, asking off usually doesn't work out. Now, this isn't to say that we shouldn't ask for days off for religious reasons. I actually think it's something we should be a little bit louder about, but generally it's not something we do. But the big reason why this isn't the case is actually later outlined in this lawsuit. A lot of pagans, including myself, usually see religion as more of a personal matter, and we don't really want to invite it into our workspace or even personal life for a variety of reasons. Often we're so collectively annoyed with how some Christians will broadcast their faith into every facet of their personal and work lives that we react in the opposite direction of simply not mentioning our religion in any capacity at all. Another concern is how people will react when we do say something about it. We can be met with ridicule from an atheist or shaming and witnessing from a Christian, or sometimes, regardless of who we're talking to, just aggressive questioning that we're really just not interested in dealing with at the moment. Most of the time, pagans are far more interested in keeping quietly to our books, enriching our spirituality through time with nature and the gods in ways that we can fit those goals around our everyday lives. Asking for days off because of pagan holidays would first involve telling people that we're pagan in the first place, and this involves an often uncomfortable conversation that can sometimes result in discriminatory behavior that our society, let's be honest, generally overlooks. So we don't do it. In fact, because of this dynamic, it's likely that you know some pagans in your life. You just don't know that they're pagan. And likewise, because of that whole thing, I was surprised to see this article, because in order for a pagan to experience religious discrimination, someone likely had to first find out that this person was pagan. So how did that happen? Well, it seems that it was rather aggressively and inappropriately asked about by the general manager, Carrie Ann Sho, while on break. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this narrative is detailed in a lawsuit and is a series of alleged events that are yet to go before a judge. But if only half of this is true, it's still very bad. And I will say that this describes a series of events that, as a pagan, I find entirely believable. The lawsuit describes Tammy McCoy of Pennsylvania getting hired in October of 2019, performing her duties on the job, and not discussing her religion or her religious beliefs at work, as she views her faith and that of others as strictly a private matter. No surprise there. Seems like a perfectly normal pagan to me. The suit continues that McCoy was outside Panera on break when the general manager, Sho, and the assistant manager, Dubs, and another person who's not otherwise mentioned, were having a casual conversation, but then Sho changed the subject to religion and disclosed that she was a Christian and asked McCoy, "What religion are you?" Now, our pagan friend answers that she's pagan because she felt obligated to give a response because Sho was her supervisor. And Sho, again, the manager, her response was to say, "You're going to hell," with the assistant manager nodding her head vigorously in agreement. Off to a fantastic start, aren't we? The lawsuit alleges that Tammy McCoy did not want to argue the matter with Sho or Dubs, again, the general manager and the assistant manager, because she didn't want to lose her job over getting into a dispute about religion, so she just said, "Okay," and walked off, and hoped the subject would be dropped and never brought up again. How familiar is that conversation to pagans watching this video? Drop in the comments stories of conversations you've had like this, especially at work, because I'll bet you there's a ton. It's wild when evangelical Christians tell us something as if we're unaware that their theology places us and everyone who doesn't align with their particular beliefs in a place of fiery torment. It's one of the embarrassingly weird things about their theology, and they repeat it often, as if they're proud of this cryptic and abusive relationship with their God, and as if other people don't know. But whatever the case, Christians, let me talk to y'all for a sec. Pagans in America are generally aware of the Christian idea of hell. But the conviction with which Christians will come at us with this idea is actually quite a bit concerning. There often seems to be a glee of superiority about the conversation while they express offhandedly sometimes, that we deserve to burn for eternity for our mere theological disagreement. And when you hire someone that has beliefs like that, combined with this attitude like the one described here, it's a setup for a human resources nightmare, as these characters will appoint themselves inquisitor of their work environments. These are the kind of work environments where wearing a cross is a simple expression of faith, a religious freedom respected by those in positions of power. But the wearing of a pentacle is seen as looking for trouble, or worse, needs to be removed out of fear of offending the customers. The number of times I've heard pagans describe their workplace experience with crosses are okay, my necklace is not, is astounding, but unfortunately not surprising. Now, this is a lot already, but the lawsuit continues. Tammy McCoy was allegedly informed that your hours are being cut until you find God, and that it was reiterated that she needed to find God before the managers would restore the previous schedule. This promise was delivered on, as according to the suit, her hours were cut. And on the days that she did work, she was sent home early by either the manager Show or the assistant manager Dubs. The lawsuit goes on to allege that these managers clocked her out for breaks that she did not take. When confronted, they alleged there was a problem in the system that never seemed to be corrected, and compensation was never given, and pay was continuously docked for breaks that she did not take. And in addition to this, Dubs and Show continued to create a hostile work environment due to McCoy's religion. The lawsuit describes that the managers would say that her religion is false, that she needs to believe in God, that her soul would be condemned to hell, and that they would pray for her soul. That sounds familiar. Apparently, these two are good friends with the district manager and are said to have been recruited by her. The lawsuit describes an incident in which Diane, the district manager, shows up at the location and is confronted about the ongoing issue, and Diane proceeds to downplay the matter by saying the two are just joking around, which... eternal torment. Hilarious, I guess. You're going to burn forever. Come on. We're laughing with you, not at you. McCoy reportedly asked to be transferred, to which Diane said no, and said further, we're probably going to get rid of you anyways, which I assume was another hilarious joke. The phone number for HR was requested, and Diane allegedly responds, if you call HR about this, you'll be fired on the spot. So it doesn't seem to stop there. The suit continues to describe an incident of threatening physical violence and discussion of getting her fired by setting her up for stealing. It describes that Tammy McCoy called HR, specifically Jen Zika of the Ohio corporate office, that messages were left and ignored. It continues to describe another incident with Diane, the district manager, in which she asks how those phone calls are going. Apparently Diane had headed off the issue somehow, and HR was ignoring the complaints. The suit continues further to describe that Tammy finally received a phone call from a coworker, not one of the managers, that she and her husband, who was also an employee at the same Panera Bread, were no longer welcome, that their employment was terminated, and that she was also told that Dubs and Show, the managers, had informed employees that no one was allowed to talk to her. What's described here are a series of illegal actions, and a violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically employment discrimination and retaliation based on her religion. The suit maintains that the actions taken by the managers and the district manager are committed with intentional and reckless disregard for McCoy's protected rights. The lawsuit details this as the reason for the suit and demands a jury trial. Now again, that's the content of a lawsuit that describes allegations, but I still find this story to be one that's all too familiar and entirely believable. This is exactly the kind of experience that causes pagans to remain in what we lovingly call the broom closet. I've had some of these kind of experiences myself, and any pagan watching likely has their own stories like this, or they might have genuine concerns about family and friends reacting negatively to the simple fact that our religion is different, and then hitting us with retaliation or discrimination because who we are offends them. Now, Panera's response to this wasn't the best. And I say this knowing that these companies tend to react to these things by ignoring them until they have to say something. And that's fine, whatever. It's to be expected. What I didn't expect was straight up tone-deaf mockery to come out of their Twitter and add insult to injury as the story was making its rounds, which prompted me to say, all right, fuck it, I'm making this video. Now, Panera, or whatever corporate panel is running your Twitter, this was, to say the least, tone-deaf. Now, let me explain the rules. When one of your franchises is in the middle of a lawsuit for religious discrimination against a pagan, you don't get to playfully reference our religious practices in commercial memery without us understanding the insult. Pagans would call that weird energy. Now, I do feel that it is responsible to point out that Panera's customer service Twitter, which mostly deals with orders gone wrong, has replied to several posts. Not mine, but several posts pointing out this issue with a canned statement seen here, that they are working with the franchise to thoroughly investigate this issue. Not an actual post, just replies. Again, safe route. Expected. Which brings us to discuss responsibility, because there's talk of boycotting Panera Bread, and that's all well and good, and I support the effort. The events, after all, are said to have happened there, and that tweet alone is enough for me to be like, nah, even if the suit's bullshit, that was just the wrong play. But the problem is that often these stores are not run by these companies, which is the reason why this lawsuit isn't actually against Panera Bread. It's against a company called Pan American. Now, Pan American is one of several companies that is part of FLYNN Restaurant Group. Both Pan American and FLYNN Restaurant Group are headed by founder, chairman, and CEO Greg Flynn, who is pictured here with what appears to be a man dressed up as an insect. Now, Pan American is the second largest Panera franchisee and runs, at the moment, according to their website, 133 bakeries across 8 states with 5,000 employees. FLYNN Restaurant Group boasts 2,355 restaurants in total, with aggressive expansion in 2021, including Pizza Huts, Panera Breads, Taco Bells, Applebee's, Wendy's, and Arby's across 44 states, with 72,000 employees and a revenue of $3.5 billion annually. It has grown into the largest franchisee in the United States, and this is what Temi McCoy is standing up against. Pan American has on its website that I've linked below 2 policies that I think are where something possibly broke down. Pan American gives their managers the freedom to manage with a local approach. Managers have the ability to run their restaurant as if they owned it themselves. There are rules that apply everywhere, but they believe that the best results come from giving local operators the opportunity to determine what's right for their business. Their second principle that I have here is that they strive to hire and retain great talent. They invest in their teams and create a culture of accountability. Now, Mr. Flynn, there appears to have been a failure somewhere in this system. From this lawsuit, we have the description of a woman who is in your employ, who attempted to do everything right, to report a serious issue of growing severity so that your company could deal with it efficiently. And as a result, she and her husband were fired. Now, as I said, there are certain personalities that seem to appoint themselves inquisitor of their workspaces. And in this case, it seems to be a handful of work friends. And as I pointed out earlier, this is the recipe for a human resources nightmare. And if this is the case, it won't be the last time that this happens. And it might not even be the first. Now, my suggestion, Mr. Flynn, if I may be so bold, is to make use of the resources you obviously have at your disposal, to uncover the truth of this matter and find those responsible. And after that, take the measures necessary to ensure that this never happens again. This means nothing less than to fire them. This is not a point where a stern talking to is sufficient. This is a point where it is time to replace the managers necessary, especially if someone in your company is a district manager interfering with HR complaints to cover for her friend's abusive behavior. Now, to ensure that this message reaches you, Mr. Flynn, I have included a link in the description of this video to Pan American Group's contact page, so that pagans and their allies can more directly make their concerns known to the actual company in question. Maybe include a few stories about their experiences with discrimination so that you might better understand how common this problem is for us. And it should be pointed out that pagans are not the only ones susceptible to individuals like the ones described in this lawsuit. So you'll likely receive stories of experiences like this from non-pagans as well, who dealt with their own workplace inquisitor. Mr. Flynn, you have the opportunity to make things right, to put systems in place to ensure that this does not happen again. I hope you take this opportunity, and maybe we can create an environment where pagans can exist without this fear of losing our livelihood when people simply find out about our religion. Now, to those of you watching this video, a further link in the description is to the website of FLYNN Restaurant Group, which features all of their associated franchise companies organized neatly by restaurant, and each has a handy-dandy map available to you so that you can discern for yourself if there are any restaurants near you that you should choose to avoid until this matter is settled. With 2,355 restaurants across 44 states, chances are there's 1 or 2 near you. There's a few near me, and you might decide, like I have, to eat somewhere else for the time being. And for those of you that feel this description of events seems all too familiar, like it does to me, know that you're not alone. Lawsuits like this often get settled or buried by company lawyers, and we're lucky to have heard about this one. So let's do what we can to let companies like Pan American know that this behavior won't fly, that workers matter, and that we see our own. And if you've ever been through something similar, let me know down in the comments. And remember to find a way or make one.